Millionaire promises millions to any woman who agrees to marry his son, victim of an incurable disease. The heir, once brilliant and full of life, now lives in isolation, immersed in pain and contempt. Among the gold-digging candidates, a young woman emerges who refuses the money and offers only love. What happens from there not only defies medical logic, but redefines the true power of a miracle. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll hear in your life. Richard Morrison looked through the wide window of his mansion while holding a crystal glass filled with whiskey. The sun was setting over the impeccable gardens, but his mind was distant. Even being one of the richest men in the United States, owner of a pharmaceutical empire that extended throughout North America, Richard felt completely powerless. His eyes drifted to a photograph on the oak desk. In it, his son Gabriel smiled, tall, athletic, with vibrant eyes. That image, frozen, in time cruelly contrasted with the current reality. Today's Gabriel was confined to a room upstairs, his youth being consumed by a rare neurodegenerative disease that none of the renowned doctors Richard had hired could stop. The sound of footsteps interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Campbell, the family's private neurologist, entered the room with a grave expression. "Mr. Morrison, we need to talk about Gabriel's condition." Richard straightened up, placing the glass on the table. "Any news from the tests?" "Unfortunately, the disease is progressing faster than we predicted. The new experimental medications aren't having the expected effect." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of those words. "How long?" The doctor hesitated. "It's difficult to be precise, but perhaps a year, at most 2. A heavy silence filled the room. The businessman sat down slowly, absorbing the impact of that sentence. "And there's nothing we can do? Money?" "Isn't a problem, doctor. We can seek treatments abroad, bring specialists." "Mr. Morrison, you've already done all that. We've consulted the best specialists in the world. This condition is extremely rare and poorly understood." Richard hit his fist on the table, making the glass tremble. "I cannot accept this. I cannot simply watch my son waste away." The doctor sighed. "The biggest problem now isn't just physical. Gabriel has lost the will to fight. He refuses treatments, barely eats. Without his cooperation, our options become even more limited." When the doctor left, Richard remained motionless, staring at his son's portrait. Gabriel was his only heir, the future of everything he had built. After his wife's early departure, Richard had dedicated his life to his son and business in that order. Now he saw both threatened. That night he decided to visit Gabriel's room. He knocked softly on the door, but there was no answer. He entered anyway. The room was dimly lit, the closed curtains preventing the moonlight from entering. The 25-year-old young man was lying with his back to the door, motionless like a statue. "Gabriel." "Son, can we talk a little?" "Go away, Dad, I'm not in the mood." Richard approached slowly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Dr. Campbell was here today, and came with more terrible news, I imagine. Spare me the details." "Gabriel, we can't give up. We'll find some treatment, some cure." Gabriel turned abruptly, revealing a once handsome face now pale and thin. "Cure? There is no cure. When will you accept that? I already have." "But you're not fighting. You refuse treatments that could help." "Help what?" "To prolong this." "Suffering for a few more months for what? So you have more time to find another heir." The words hit Richard like a physical blow. "How can you think that? You're my son, not just my heir." Gabriel laughed without humor. "I know how important the continuity of the Morrison empire is to you, more important than anything else." Richard wanted to protest, but the words died in his throat. There was truth in that accusation. For years he had prepared Gabriel to take over the business, often prioritizing his business education over other aspects of fatherhood. "There's no way, Dad. No heir, no empire. Everything will end with me." That phrase echoed in Richard's mind for days. The idea of losing Gabriel was unbearable, but the prospect of seeing his entire legacy disappear also tormented him. No descendants, no continuity. Everything he had worked for would be divided, sold, diluted after his departure. On a Sunday morning, while having coffee on the veranda, Richard had an idea that initially seemed absurd to him. What if he could get a new heir? Gabriel was too young to have children, and now with the disease that possibility seemed even more distant. But what if he, Richard at 58, could have another child? The thought crystallized throughout the day. He would need a wife, obviously, someone young, healthy, who could bear a child before it was too late. He had no romantic illusions. He knew few. Women would genuinely be interested in a man of his age, no matter how well preserved he might be. But he had something that many would desire: money. Lots of money. That same afternoon, he called his trusted lawyer, Michael Adams, to discuss the idea. "Are you serious, Richard? You want to offer money for a woman to marry you?" "It's not just that, Michael. I want a mother for my future child. Someone who can continue the Morrison lineage." "What about Gabriel? What will he think of this?" Richard frowned. "He doesn't need to know, at least not now. When everything is arranged, I'll find a way to explain." Michael adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "And how much do you intend to offer?" $50 million. Half at the wedding, half when the baby is born." The lawyer almost choked. $50 million? That will attract all kinds of interested women, Richard. Exactly what I want. A wide range of candidates so I can choose the most suitable one. Someone healthy, educated, from a good family. How do you plan to conduct this selection? Discreetly. No scandalous announcements. Use your contacts. Spread the news in select circles. I want preliminary interviews, background checks, medical exams. Only present me with the finalists. While they discussed the details, Richard felt a twinge of guilt. He was practically buying a wife, treating motherhood as a commercial transaction. But he quickly justified it to himself. He would offer this woman a life of luxury and comfort. Many would gladly accept the deal. In the small town of Clearwater, hundreds of miles away, Hannah Stewart arranged the flowers in the small flower shop where she worked. At 26, she carried in her brown eyes the sadness of someone who grew up without affection. Daughter of a father who had rejected her since birth and a stepmother who treated her like a servant, Hannah had found in caring for plants a way to channel her repressed affection. Mrs. Martha, an elderly lady who frequented the flower shop, observed Hannah with maternal affection. She saw in the young woman a simple and genuine beauty, a pure heart that deserved more from life than that small town could offer. "Hannah, dear, did you see that news about the businessman who's looking for a wife?" Hannah smiled as she sprayed water on the orchids. "Those fairy tale stories aren't for girls like me, Mrs. Martha." The old lady smiled enigmatically. "You never know, my child. Destiny has surprising paths." That night, while Hannah slept in her simple room, Mrs. Martha was writing a letter that would forever change the course of that story. Hannah would never have imagined that a simple letter sent by Mrs. Martha would place her before Richard Morrison. When she was called for an interview in the capital, she thought it was for a job as a florist in some luxury hotel. Upon discovering the true nature of the invitation, her first impulse was to refuse immediately. "This is absurd. I'm not merchandise to be bought," she protested before Michael, the lawyer who conducted the preliminary interviews. "I understand your indignation, Miss Stewart, but Mr. Morrison isn't buying anyone. He's seeking a life partner in unconventional circumstances." Hannah looked out the window of the luxurious office. "Why was I selected? I didn't even apply." Michael consulted a folder. "We received a very eloquent letter from a lady named Martha Olson describing you as the most dedicated young woman with the purest heart in Clearwater. Your references were impeccable." A mixture of surprise and irritation took hold of Hannah. Mrs. Martha had interfered in her life without permission, but before she could protest again, the door opened and Richard Morrison entered the room. Even without ever having seen him, Hannah recognized him instantly. The imposing posture, the impeccable suit, the penetrating eyes that carried a mixture of authority and sadness. Richard, in turn, paused for a moment upon seeing Hannah. Something about her, Perhaps the simplicity of the floral dress or the way she nervously held her worn purse intrigued him. "Miss Stewart, this is Mr. Richard Morrison," Michael introduced. Hannah stood up, extending her hand with a firmness that surprised even herself. "Mr. Morrison, I came to clarify a misunderstanding. I'm not interested in your proposal." Richard raised an eyebrow, not accustomed to such direct rejections. "You haven't even heard the details of the offer." "I don't need to hear them. I wouldn't marry for money." A tense silence filled the room. Michael seemed uncomfortable, but Richard remained impassive, studying her with growing interest. "And why would you come all the way here just to refuse?" Hannah hesitated. "To be honest, I didn't know exactly what this was about. Mrs. Martha, the lady who wrote the letter, didn't tell me the truth." Richard indicated a chair. "Since you're here, why don't we talk? I promise not to take too much of your time." Against her better judgment, Hannah sat down. Richard began to explain his situation, omitting Gabriel's condition, speaking only about his need for an heir and the lack of conventional romantic prospects due to his age and professional commitments. 50 million is an amount that would completely change your life, Miss Stewart. You could help your family, your community. Hannah interrupted him. "Money doesn't interest me, Mr. Morrison, and if I may say so, a marriage shouldn't be a commercial transaction. At your age, perhaps you still believe in fairy tales, but in the real world, there are things money can't buy. Mutual respect, companionship, care." Hannah paused, gathering courage. "If I may ask, why do you need an heir so badly? Don't you have children?" The question hit Richard like a physical blow. For an instant, the mask of the relentless businessman fell, revealing a deep pain. "I do have a son, Gabriel. And he can't. Gabriel is facing difficulties. He won't be able to continue the family business." Something in Richard's voice, a note of carefully disguised desperation, touched Hannah deeply. Years caring for sick plants had given her a special sensitivity to recognize suffering. "What kind of difficulties?" she asked softly. Richard hesitated, but something in Hannah's genuinely interested expression made him continue. "He has a rare neurodegenerative disease. The doctors say that. There's not much time." Hannah felt her eyes water. "I'm so sorry." "Gabriel has lost the will to live. He refuses treatments, visits, everything. He's giving up." Without thinking, Hannah extended her hand and touched Richard's arm. "No one should go through that alone." Richard looked at that delicate hand on his arm and felt something unusual, a genuine human connection, without interests or hidden agendas. In that moment, he made an impulsive decision. "Miss Stewart, I want to modify my proposal." Hannah withdrew her hand, suddenly conscious of the gesture. "I've already said I'm not interested in money. It's not about that. I want to offer you a job as my son's caregiver." The proposal caught Hannah by surprise. "Caregiver? But I don't have medical training. Gabriel has nurses and doctors at his disposal. What he needs is someone to help him find the will to live again, someone who brings light." Hannah hesitated. Caring for someone who was ill would be challenging, but it wasn't something that frightened her. Throughout her life, she had found purpose in caring for fragile beings, plants, abandoned animals, elderly neighbors. "Why me? There must be more qualified professionals." Richard smiled slightly. "Intuition, perhaps, or desperation, but there's something about you, a natural kindness that my son might need more than any expensive medication." That night, staying in a luxury hotel while considering the proposal, Hannah called Mrs. Martha. The conversation was initially tense, with Hannah expressing her frustration at the lady's interference in her life. But Mrs. Martha, with the wisdom of years, knew how to calm the young woman. "Dear, I've known you since you were a little girl. I saw how your father and stepmother suffocated your gentle essence. This could be your chance to use that gift to help someone who really needs it. But what if I can't help? What if this young man is difficult? Wounded people are usually difficult, Hannah, but you have a special gift for healing invisible wounds." The next morning, Hannah communicated her decision to Richard. She would accept the job as a caregiver, but with conditions: no marriage, no money beyond a fair salary, and freedom to implement her own approach to care. Richard, surprised by the determination of the young woman of humble origin, accepted the terms. "When can you start?" "Immediately. I just need to get a few things from Clearwater." 2 days later, Hannah arrived at the Morrison mansion. The grandeur of the place, with its extensive gardens, imposing columns, and sumptuous decoration, made her heart race. A stern-looking housekeeper, Olivia, received her with evident distrust. "Mr. Richard is in a business meeting. I'll show you your room and the house premises." As they walked through the luxurious corridors, Hannah felt the curious glances of the staff. Clearly, her presence had generated buzz. "Young Gabriel's room is at the end of that corridor," Olivia indicated. "But I should warn you that he rarely allows strangers to enter." "Does he know I'm coming?" Olivia twisted her lips. "Mr. Richard informed him last night. The reaction was not positive." Hannah swallowed hard. The task would be more difficult than she had imagined. After settling into a room larger and more luxurious than her entire house in Clearwater, Hannah decided she wouldn't delay the inevitable. With determined steps, she headed to Gabriel's room. She knocked softly on the door. No answer. She knocked again. "Go away," came a weak voice from inside. "Gabriel, my name is Hannah. Your father hired me to—" "I know exactly what you were." "Hired for?" The voice cut in, now stronger and filled with bitterness. "Another desperate attempt by my father. I don't need a babysitter, nurse, or whatever you are." Hannah took a deep breath. "May I come in? I'd like us to introduce ourselves properly." "No. Please, just 5 minutes." After a long silence, an exasperated sigh was heard. "The door is unlocked." Hannah turned the doorknob, feeling her heart race. The room was dimly lit, heavy curtains blocking the daylight. In the center, a king-size bed where a male figure was reclined against pillows. When her eyes adjusted to the darkness, Hannah could finally see Gabriel's face. And what she saw made her heart ache. Even weakened by the disease, with a pale face and deep dark circles, Gabriel Morrison possessed an impressive beauty. Strong features like his father's, but with an almost poetic delicacy. Eyes of a deep blue that, even clouded by pain, still conveyed a disconcerting intensity. "Satisfied? You've seen the dying man. Now you can go report to my father." Hannah didn't back down from the hostility. Instead, she calmly approached and opened a small gap in the curtain, letting in a soft beam of light. "I'm not here to report anything to anyone. I'm here to meet you." The first days of Hannah in the Morrison mansion were a test of endurance. Gabriel systematically rejected any attempt at approach, responding with sarcasm or simply ignoring her presence. When she brought meals, he barely touched the food. When she suggested a walk in the gardens, she received icy stares. "Why don't you just give up?" Gabriel asked one morning, when Hannah opened the curtains, letting the autumn sun invade the room. "My father will pay you anyway." Hannah continued tidying the room, placing fresh flowers in a vase. "I'm not here for the money." Gabriel let out a dry laugh. "Of course not. You're here for my charming personality and the pleasant company I provide." Hannah turned to face him. "I'm here because no one deserves to face pain alone, not even someone as stubbornly unpleasant as you." The frankness caught him by surprise. For an instant, the mask of indifference slipped, revealing genuine confusion. Gabriel wasn't used to people who spoke without filters in his presence. Since the diagnosis, everyone had treated him as if he were made of crystal. Doctors, nurses, employees, and especially his father. That afternoon, while organizing Gabriel's medications, Hannah overheard a conversation between 2 maids in the hallway. "Do you think she knows about the money?" one whispered. "Impossible not to know. 50 million. Who would refuse that? But why pretend she's here to take care of him? Why not just accept the marriage with the old man?" "Strategy, my dear. Gain the son's trust and then take the father's fortune. She's smart." Hannah felt her face burn with indignation, but she contained herself. Those words, however, explained many things. The suspicious looks from the staff, Olivia's cold treatment, Gabriel's extreme hostility. Everyone thought she was there out of self-interest. What Hannah didn't know was that Gabriel had also heard the conversation. When she entered the room with the medication tray, she found him more closed off than ever. "So that's it," he said with a cutting voice. 50 million. Now I understand why a young woman like you would abandon everything to care for a dying man. Hannah placed the tray on the nightstand. "It's not what you're thinking." "No? My father offered you a fortune to marry him, and you, being smart, decided to first win over the sick son to ensure the complete package. Brilliant, I must admit." "That's ridiculous. I refused the money. I came as a caregiver, not as what? A bride? Future stepmother?" Gabriel interrupted her, trying to sit more upright, but an involuntary tremor made him drop the water glass. Hannah instinctively moved to help, but he repelled her with an abrupt gesture. "I don't need your pity or your help. I want you to get out of my room and my life." With tears in her eyes, Hannah collected the glass shards. "Think what you want. I won't abandon you." In the following days, the tension between them reached its peak. Gabriel refused to speak, to eat in her presence, to take the medicines she brought. Hannah, in turn, remained firm, performing her tasks in determined silence. Richard, busy with a business crisis, barely appeared at the mansion. When he did come, he briefly spoke with Hannah about his son's condition and left again, leaving her to deal with the increasingly difficult situation alone. On a particularly cold night, after Gabriel refused dinner for the third consecutive time, Hannah made a drastic decision. She returned to his room carrying her own suitcase. "What are you doing?" Gabriel asked, visibly confused. "If you won't eat, I won't either." Hannah sat in the armchair near the window. "I'll stay here without eating until you decide to feed yourself properly." Gabriel stared at her in astonishment. "This is ridiculous. You'll give up in a few hours." "Try me." For 24 hours, both remained in a silent impasse. Gabriel watched, incredulous, as Hannah refused the meals brought by Olivia, who looked at the scene with growing concern. On the second night, exhausted and hungry, Gabriel finally gave in. "Fine, I'll eat something. Satisfied?" A small smile appeared on Hannah's lips. "Almost. I'll get something for both of us." That shared meal, although wrapped in tense silence, marked a subtle change. In the following days, Gabriel no longer refused food, and occasionally answered Hannah's questions with more than monosyllables. One morning, Hannah found him trying to shave, his hands trembling too much to hold the razor steadily. Without saying a word, she slowly approached. "May I help?" Gabriel hesitated, pride fighting against need. Finally, after a long moment, he extended the razor to her. With delicate touches, Hannah slid the blade over the young man's face, feeling under her fingers the accelerated pulse of his jugular. "Why are you really here?" he suddenly asked, his blue eyes fixed on hers. Hannah maintained her concentration on what she was doing. "Because I know what it's like to be alone when you need someone the most. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. I know you're afraid, not of the disease, but of allowing yourself to depend on someone." Gabriel looked away. Easy to theorize about others' lives. "I'm not theorizing, I'm observing." Hannah finished the job and gently cleaned his face with a towel. "There. Much better now." For the first time since they met, Gabriel looked at her without hostility. "Thank you." That simple thank you represented a small victory. In the following days, Hannah began to introduce small changes to the routine. She brought books to read aloud, music to play in the room, related funny stories from the town where she grew up. Gabriel rarely actively participated, but Hannah noticed that he listened, that his eyes occasionally shone with something beyond pain. One night, after helping him with physiotherapy exercises, Hannah found Gabriel more downcast than usual. The pains had worsened, and the tremors were more intense. "I'll call the doctor," she said, concerned. "No, I don't want any more doctors, more exams, more false hopes." Hannah sat on the edge of the bed. "What can I do to help?" Gabriel hesitated, then said in a low voice, "Could you stay here for a while?" She nodded, settling into the armchair beside him. "No, here," he indicated a space on the bed next to him, "just until I fall asleep." Surprised, Hannah sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance. Slowly, she began to hum an old lullaby that her mother, before departing, used to sing. The soft voice filled the room, and gradually, Gabriel's tense shoulders relaxed. Without realizing it, Hannah fell asleep right there. She woke up hours later, startled, to find Gabriel observing her with an expression she couldn't decipher. "Sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep," she said, embarrassed. "You look different when you sleep. Younger, more vulnerable." Hannah nervously adjusted her hair. "We're all vulnerable in sleep. I don't know why you haven't given up yet. Any sensible person would have left." "Maybe I'm not sensible." Gabriel hesitated, as if carefully considering his next words. "He really offered you 50 million. Hannah sighed. "Yes, to marry him and have a child." "And you refused?" "Of course I refused. What kind of person would accept something like that?" Gabriel looked away. "The kind of person most would be, given the right incentive." After a pause, he added, "Why did you stay then?" Hannah stood up, adjusting the blanket over him. "Because I saw in your eyes the same loneliness I've felt my whole life, and no one should feel that." In the following days, something subtle changed between them. Gabriel began to ask questions about her life, about Clearwater, about the plants she loved so much. Hannah, in turn, risked occasionally teasing him, discovering that beneath the bitterness there was a sharp and intelligent sense of humor. One afternoon, Richard unexpectedly appeared in his son's room. Hannah was helping Gabriel eat some soup, and for the first time, the young man showed no resistance. The businessman observed the scene with barely disguised surprise. "Things seem to be progressing," he commented, approaching. Gabriel immediately resumed his defensive posture. "What brings you here, Dad? Problems in the Empire?" Richard ignored the provocation. "I came to see how you are. The doctors noticed improvement in your latest tests. Your levels are more stabilized. Miraculously, considering I refuse half the treatments." Richard cast a grateful look at Hannah, who stood up discreetly. "I'll leave you two alone," she said, but Gabriel held her wrist. "Stay." That small gesture didn't go unnoticed by Richard. After the businessman left, Gabriel remained thoughtful. "My father never really cared about me," he finally said, "only about what I represented, the continuity of the Morrison legacy." Hannah sat down again. "I think he cares in his own way. Maybe he doesn't know how to show it." "Easy for you to say." "You grew up in a normal family, in a peaceful little town." Hannah laughed without humor. "Normal? My father blamed me for my mother's death in childbirth. My stepmother treated me like a servant. I spent my entire childhood feeling like I took up too much space." Gabriel looked at her with renewed interest. "How did you survive?" "I found beauty where I could, in plants, in the sky, in the small kindnesses of strangers." Hannah smiled slightly. "It's surprising how much we can endure when we find reasons to continue." That night, after helping Gabriel to bed, Hannah retreated to her own room. She was physically and emotionally exhausted. As she prepared for sleep, she heard a knock at the door. It was Olivia, the housekeeper, with a grave expression. "Mr. Richard wants to see you in his office, immediately." Hannah's heart accelerated. Had she done something wrong? Was she about to be dismissed? With hesitant steps, she headed to the office on the lower floor. Richard was waiting for her, standing by the window contemplating the night. When she entered, he turned with a serious expression. "Hannah, I need to be direct. I've noticed changes in Gabriel's behavior since you arrived. Positive changes." She breathed with relief. "I'm doing the best I can." "Yes, I can see that. And that's why—" Richard hesitated, as if searching for the right words. "That's why I want to renew my initial proposal." Hannah felt her blood freeze. "Mr. Morrison, I've already made it clear that—" "Don't misunderstand me," he interrupted. "I'm no longer looking for a wife for myself. I'm proposing that you marry Gabriel." Hannah stared at Richard with disbelief. "What?" "Marry my son," the businessman repeated, approaching. "The financial offer remains the same. 50 million. Half at the wedding, half when, if you have a child." This is absurd," Hannah stammered, feeling her face burn. "Gabriel is sick. You can't be suggesting that." "The doctors say his condition doesn't affect his fertility. There's still time for him to father an heir before the disease progresses too far." Hannah stepped back, horrified by the coldness of those words. "Your son is not a machine for producing heirs. He's a human being fighting for his own life." "Precisely why I'm proposing this." Richard remained impassive. "You've brought something back to him, an interest in life we haven't seen for months. Maybe with you, with a purpose, with the prospect of a family." "No," Hannah interrupted him firmly. "I won't use Gabriel that way, nor will I allow you to use him." Richard studied her for a moment. "You like him, don't you? I see it in your eyes when you talk about him." Hannah looked away, unable to deny it. In the last few weeks, something had changed. What had begun as compassion had transformed into admiration for Gabriel's strength, for his intelligence, for his carefully hidden vulnerability. "My feelings aren't up for discussion. What you're proposing is wrong on so many levels." "Think carefully," Richard insisted. "With that money you could provide Gabriel with the best experimental treatments. You could travel, seek specialists abroad." "Do you really think he would accept a marriage arranged by his father? Or that I would accept getting married for money?" Richard smiled slightly. "Gabriel doesn't need to know about the financial agreement. As for you, well, you've already demonstrated that money isn't your priority. Consider it just a bonus, a means to give my son the best you can while there's time." Hannah left the office feeling suffocated. Richard's proposal echoed in her mind. Like an offense. But worse than the proposal was the doubt that began to insinuate itself. What if a marriage really gave Gabriel a new perspective? What if the money could really pay for treatments that would help him? Lost in these thoughts, she didn't notice the figure waiting in the hallway until she almost collided with him. "Gabriel!" she exclaimed, startled. "What are you doing out of bed at this hour?" Leaning on a cane, Gabriel observed her with an indecipherable expression. "I heard voices. I came to see what was happening." Hannah felt a chill of fear. "How long have you been here?" "Long enough," he replied, his voice dangerously calm. "So my father wants to buy you for me now? How generous of him." "Gabriel, it's not what it seems." "No?" he laughed bitterly. "It seems exactly what it is. My father trying to buy the only genuine thing that has appeared in my life in the last few years." Hannah's heart accelerated at those words. "You don't believe that I would accept?" "No." Gabriel took a step toward her, leaning heavily on the cane. "But that doesn't make the proposal any less offensive to both of us." That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. The conversation with Richard and the subsequent encounter with Gabriel had turned her world upside down. She felt betrayed, manipulated, but above all, concerned about the effect this would have on the fragile trust Gabriel had begun to place in her. The next morning, Gabriel refused to see her. The bedroom door remained locked, and all her attempts at explanation were met with silence. After hours of frustrated attempts, Hannah decided she needed fresh air. She headed to the mansion's gardens, seeking a moment of calm to organize her thoughts. It was there, sitting on a stone bench under an old oak tree, that Richard found her. "He doesn't want to see me," said Hannah before the businessman could speak. "Thanks to your absurd proposal." Richard sat beside her, suddenly looking older and more tired. "I made an error in judgment. I shouldn't have suggested something like that." Hannah looked at him, surprised by the admission. "Why did you do it then?" "Desperation, perhaps. When you see a son withering away, you do anything to save him." Richard ran his hands through his graying hair. "In recent months, I've watched Gabriel close himself off more and more, slowly giving up. Then you arrived, and for the first time, I saw hope in his eyes." "That doesn't justify trying to manipulate us." "No, it doesn't." Richard sighed deeply. "I've always been good at business, at finding practical solutions to complex problems. But with Gabriel, I never knew how to be the father he needed." Hannah felt her anger diminish in the face of that vulnerable confession. "It's still not too late to learn." Richard was silent for a moment. "He trusts you. Give him time. Eventually, he'll want to hear you." 3 days passed without Gabriel allowing Hannah into his room. She continued leaving meals, medications, and small notes outside the door, but there was no response. On the 4th night, Exhausted and disheartened, Hannah was about to retire when she heard a crash coming from Gabriel's room. She ran down the hallway and knocked frantically on the door. "Gabriel! Gabriel, are you okay?" No response. Fear took hold of her. "Gabriel, I'm coming in. If you can, get away from the door." With a shoulder thrust, Hannah managed to force the locked door. What she saw froze her blood. Gabriel was collapsed on the bathroom floor, violently convulsing, a bloodstain spreading where his head had hit the marble. "Help!" she shouted, running to the young man. "Someone call an ambulance." Carefully, she turned Gabriel on his side to prevent him from choking, holding him firmly as the spasms shook his body. Olivia appeared at the door, horrified by the scene. "The paramedics are on their way," the housekeeper informed, running to get towels. The following minutes seemed like hours. Hannah held Gabriel against her, whispering words of comfort, silently praying for him to resist. When the paramedics finally arrived, she was covered with his blood, her hands trembling, her face marked by tears. "Please save him," she begged as they placed him on the stretcher. "Please." At the hospital, Hannah remained in the waiting room while Gabriel was treated in the emergency room. Richard arrived shortly after, his face pale with concern. What happened? "A seizure, from what I understood. He hit his head when he fell." Richard sank into a chair, looking completely defeated. "This was in the medical reports as a possibility, but we hoped the anticonvulsants." "He wasn't taking his medication." "In the last few days," Hannah admitted, feeling guilty. Since our discussion." The hours dragged on. Eventually, a doctor sought them out with news. Gabriel was stabilized, but remained unconscious. The fall had caused a brain hematoma that needed to be drained. "Can we see him?" asked Hannah. "Briefly." "He's in the ICU." Gabriel looked terribly fragile against the white hospital sheets, connected to monitors and tubes. Hannah approached cautiously, taking his inert hand between hers. "I'm here," she whispered. "Please, fight." "Please come back to me." Richard watched from the door without the courage to approach further. "He was always stubborn," he commented with a choked voice. "Since childhood. When he decided something, nothing would make him change his mind." Hannah didn't take her eyes off Gabriel's pale face. "Then let's hope he's decided to live." For 3 days, Hannah didn't leave Gabriel's side, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair, talking to him even without a response, reading his favorite books, telling stories from her childhood. The doctors explained that, even unconscious, Gabriel might hear, and that familiar stimuli were important for recovery. In the early morning of the 4th day, while Hannah dozed in the chair, she felt a slight squeeze on her hand. She opened her eyes to find Gabriel looking at her, his blue eyes finally open. "You stayed," he whispered with a hoarse voice. Hannah felt tears of relief run down her face. "Of course I stayed. Where else would I be?" Gabriel tried to smile, but the pain made him frown. I thought you had left after what my father proposed." "I'm not going anywhere." Hannah squeezed his hand gently. "Unless you really want me to go." He looked at her intensely. "I don't want that. I never did." The following days were of slow recovery. Gabriel was transferred to a private room and gradually began doing physiotherapy again. Hannah remained by his side, encouraging him, celebrating each small progress. One afternoon, while she helped him walk down the hospital corridor, Gabriel suddenly stopped. "When I thought I was going to die," he said in a low voice, "it wasn't my life that flashed before my eyes. It was everything I hadn't lived yet, and you were there in every scene." Hannah felt her heart race. "Gabriel." "No, let me finish." He took a deep breath. "I spent months hiding from life, drowning in self-pity. Then you appeared with your stubbornness and your irritating kindness, and suddenly I wanted more time. Not for my father's business, not for some abstract legacy, but for moments like this." With effort, Gabriel brought his hand to Hannah's face, gently caressing her cheek. "I don't know how much time I have left. The doctors aren't optimistic. But however long it is, I want to spend it really living. With you, if you'll accept me." Hannah couldn't contain her tears. "You're not asking me to marry you just because your father suggested it, are you?" Gabriel laughed, a genuine sound she had rarely heard. "God, no. Actually, I'm doing this specifically because he suggested it. I've always been rebellious like that." They laughed together, and then, without warning, Gabriel leaned in and kissed her, a gentle, hesitant kiss, but filled with promise. 2 weeks later, Gabriel was discharged to continue his recovery at home. The Morrison mansion, previously an oppressive environment, seemed different now. Hannah had ordered all the curtains opened, allowing natural light to flood the rooms. Fresh flowers decorated the premises, and soft music played through the speakers. Richard observed the changes with surprise and gratitude. One afternoon, he called Hannah to his office again. "I want to show you something," he said, handing her a folder. Inside were banking documents, the transfer of $25 million to an account in Hannah's name. "I can't accept this," she said immediately, returning the folder. "I'm not giving this to you as part of any agreement," Richard explained. "It's a thank you for saving my son, not just from the disease, but from himself." Hannah hesitated. "Even so, I can't. The money is there whether you accept it or not. Use it for Gabriel's treatment, for travel, to build a life together, or donate it all to charity. The decision is yours." That night, Hannah told Gabriel about the donation. To her surprise, he didn't seem shocked. "My father has a strange way of expressing feelings," he commented. "For him, money is the language of love." "And for you?" asked Hannah, nestling beside him in bed. "What is the language of love?" Gabriel smiled, pulling her closer. "Actions. Standing by someone when it would be easier to walk away, opening curtains when it's more comfortable, to remain in darkness." The next morning during breakfast, Gabriel felt a strange sensation. He raised his hand and noticed with astonishment that the characteristic tremors of the disease had disappeared. "Hannah," he called, his voice trembling with emotion, "not symptoms. Look." The tests conducted in the following weeks left the ED doctors perplexed. The neurological markers of the disease were regressing, something considered practically impossible according to medical literature. "I can't explain it," admitted Dr. Campbell, analyzing the results. "It's as if your body were reversing the degenerative process." "I can explain," said Gabriel, looking at Hannah with adoration. "When you find a reason strong enough to live, the body follows the heart." 6 months later, in an intimate ceremony in the mansion's gardens, Hannah and Gabriel were married. She wore a simple dress with wildflowers in her hair. He, miraculously standing without support, waited for her under an arch of white roses. Richard, beside his son, seemed to have aged 10 years and rejuvenated 20 simultaneously. The tension that had always marked his face had given way to a new serenity. "I never thought I'd live to see this day," he confessed to Gabriel as they waited for Hannah to walk through the garden. "Neither did I," admitted Gabriel. "But she taught me that life always holds surprises, some of them wonderful." During the party, Richard made an announcement that surprised everyone. The Morrison Foundation for Rare Disease Research would be inaugurated the following month with an initial endowment of $500 million. "My son had a second chance," he said, emotional. "I want other families to have the same hope." Later, while dancing under the stars, Gabriel held Hannah firmly against him, marveling at the recovered strength of his arms. "Do you know what really cured me?" he whispered in her ear. Hannah smiled. "What?" "The possibility of a future. Before you, I only saw darkness ahead. Now I see light, I see life, I see hope." In the years that followed, the Morrison mansion, once silent as a mausoleum, filled with life. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the corridors, first with the arrival of little Martha, named in honor of the lady who had changed their destinies, then with the twins, Richard and Laura. Gabriel, completely recovered, took over the presidency of Morrison Enterprises, transforming it into a corporation with social purpose, focused on accessible medications and innovative research. Hannah, in turn, transformed the vast gardens of the mansion into a botanical sanctuary open to the public, specialized in plants with medicinal properties. The old wing where Gabriel had spent his darkest days was converted into a support center for families facing rare diagnoses, offering not only medical treatment, but psychological support and hope. On a sunny afternoon, 10 years after their first meeting, Hannah found Gabriel watching their children play in the garden. She approached silently, hugging him from behind. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. Gabriel turned, his face marked no longer by disease, but by smile lines. "About how I almost lost all of this, about how close I was to giving up." "But you didn't give up," Hannah reminded him, kissing him softly. "Thanks to you, my personal miracle." Gabriel lifted her in his arms, spinning her, as he used to do when they were dating, provoking laughter from the children who ran to join the fun. Richard, now a loving and present grandfather, watched the scene from the terrace, his heart overflowing with gratitude for the family he almost didn't have. There, under the same sky that had witnessed so much pain, now shone the proof that, even in the darkest nights, there exists the possibility of dawn, that even when science finds no answers, the heart sometimes knows the way. That love, in its purest and most stubborn form, can be the most powerful medicine. Dear listeners, we hope that Hannah and Gabriel's journey has deeply touched your hearts. For more equally moving stories that explore the miracles of love and perseverance, we've prepared a special playlist that you can find by clicking to the left of your screen. If this narrative of overcoming and hope resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that remind us of the transformative power of true love. Share in the comments if you have witnessed